So hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us again this week for Keep the Ghost Light On with myself, Steve Stott, President of the Sherman Players, and my co-host, Robin Frome. So, oh, there we go. The Robin's raising the roof again. I think he did that the first time.
Yep.
So he's doing it. He's doing it for the last time.
Bookending.
Yeah, the bookending. He is a bit of a bookend, so that actually works quite nicely. This is our final show, final scheduled show. I'm in America, aren't I? Scheduled show. Our final scheduled show. We've had a blast. For the last 6 months, we've been doing Keep the Ghost Light On. We started off. We didn't record. We just did Zoom sessions, and then eventually realised that people really wanted to see this, so we moved on to Facebook Live. We also record the shows now and pretty them up a little bit and put them out again for people to see. So we have a backlog of shows on Facebook, on the Sherman Playhouse Facebook page, and I'm also in the process of uploading those to YouTube as well to form a playlist. So that'll be something to look forward to. I won't dwell too much on the fact that this is our last show. We'll shed a tear after it, I'm sure, but there will be more. We're expecting to do specials or catch up with people who've been on the show before, see where they are now, and sort of where are you now? Are they any more wrinkly? Have they lost any hair? Have they put on weight? That kind of thing, just to make Robin and I feel a little bit better. So before we get into our guests, I could talk about how the UK is going back into more or less full lockdown. I've got family in the UK, so obviously a vested interest in that. I could talk about the current political situation and the Georgia elections tomorrow. I suspect one of our guests might just allude to that as we go through. Yes, I wonder which one that is. Slight disclaimer that the opinions of our guests are their own opinions, and whatever sympathies or otherwise that we may have as individuals, they do reflect the opinions of the individuals. So that's the slight disclaimer on that. So I could talk about that. I could talk about the Electoral College. I could talk about all kinds of things, but I'm not going to. I'm going to talk about one thing, very serious thing, which I thought, as it's our last show, it was worth talking about in this. So what I wanted to talk about is Ratatouille, the TikTok musical. I watched Ratatouille, the TikTok musical, and if you haven't heard anything at all about that, you must be living under a rock. So for Robin's benefit, I'll explain it. There we go. Ratatouille, the TikTok musical, is effectively a crowdsourced, socially distanced musical version of Ratatouille, the Disney movie. It was a brainchild of one or two people out on the internet who decided, wouldn't it be great if that was a musical? And it snowballed from there. And the reason I talk about it now isn't really so glib. There's a good reason for talking about it. One of the common threads that's been through just about every show we've done in this season has been that creatives must create, and creatives will find a way to create, no matter what the obstacles, no matter what the challenges. They will find a way to create. And I watched it, and that was what was running through my mind all the way through. It's not something that will replace musical theatre as we know it. It's not something which is of the highest technical or presentational quality. It was never intended to be. But what it is a fantastic example of what can happen when enthusiastic, creative people have an opportunity to create, and when you can get the interest of of people with the technical and the performance ability to be able to pull it off. There were some big names in the show. There were lots of people you've never heard of who contributed, but I was impressed. There'll be lots of people who may have watched it and thought, what was all that about then? But unless you're in our position, or you're in a position where you understand musical theatre, or you're in a position where you understand just what it takes to do that kind of thing, maybe you wouldn't get it. But I think they did a fantastic job. And I believe they've raised a vast sum for the Actors Fund. I forget the number, so I won't quote it. But it is a vast sum that they've raised for the Actors Fund, which is obviously a very worthwhile cause to be involved with. So that's my very serious talk for the start of this this episode. So what I'll do now is I shall hand over to Robin, who will introduce our wonderful, wonderful, wonderful guests. So Robin, over to you.
How can I follow that? Ratatouille.
Well, there you go. Well,
Maybe with a main dish. All right. I didn't say that. We have three main dishes today. Tina Collins is found her from friends of other friends of other friends. The Facebook line keeps going on and on and on and on. And very interesting resume she has. A lot of work in China, and her first role was the baby Jesus, I heard, and that was yesterday. But you got to tell us all about that. And so, Tina, we're going to talk about your resume a bit and how the pandemic has affected you from when it started to the middle to now, and what do you think is going to be happening for the future?
Awesome. So I was the baby Jesus at.
Start with that.
But my parents are actors, and they were in the church play, and it was this big, grand, old Episcopalian church. And I don't know how, but my mom, 2 weeks after having me, sat on a donkey and held me as Mary with baby Jesus all the way down the Episcopalian church and the cobblestones. It was gorgeous. So my first introduction was quite grand to theatrical performance as an infant. But I continued that, and I did little baby ballet and baby performances and stuff like that. And then we did about 6 shows a year as middle to high school, and then into college as well. So I was overlapping shows like back to back, and I would go from Mrs. Malaprop and saying my malapropisms to Cinderella, and I was so confused as to which genre and style and the place that I was. But I actually learned Chinese when I was 12 years old as a crazy second language thing. It's amazing how that all happened. But my mom is incredible educator, so is my dad, and they both chose like anything for us, and they said, really chase your passions. So I will equip you, I will give you opportunities, but do what you want. And I said, I want to act. I want to act, and I want to speak languages, and I want to travel the world. And so they said, okay. And by the time I finished university, I went to China. Did not think for a minute that it would be possible to do acting and China together, but it did. So for 10 years, I have been on the field in Beijing, China, working with some of the best artists out there who really welcomed me in because I was fluent. So when I got there, I already spoke the language. I knew the acting. I knew, I had theatrical background. So I was sort of transitioning from theater to film, which was a big transition, but I was doing it. I wasn't just taking classes. I was actually filming. So, and it was in Chinese, the first few TV shows that I did. And they were like, yeah, you speak Chinese, just go on the set. And it's just amazing how that happened. But the cool thing is it sort of developed a couple of things. One was that I was a dialect coach for very big actors who were traveling between the US and China. The second was I was an accent dialect coach. So it wasn't just, Chinese and English, but it was also, here's the standard American accent, here's what you're going to do. So I did linguistics in school as well as theatrical performance and China studies. So I did a whole triple major, and I was really prepared by the time I got to China. I just had no idea that film would actually come into play. So I was coming home for Christmas 2019, stayed here, and I got a call from the crew that I was on as a dialect coach. And they said, "I'm so sorry, there's a virus and it's not looking good." And so the crews all called me and said, we're pulling production. I'm like, we don't ever pull. I mean, we work sometimes 17-hour days in China. And I was like, we don't pull production. This doesn't happen. What is going on? And then I did more research. I was talking to more people. And I had to make some really hard choices. And one was to cut my lease in China. I had just gotten a new apartment in October. It was beautiful. The other was to call all 3 productions I was signed for and break the contract. I moved from, I was in Boston to fly out the day that they made the final call and the borders closed. So I called my roommate, said, what are we supposed to do? She's like, come to San Francisco. So I said, okay. So I got on an opposite flight from, instead of China, San Francisco, landed there, and I saw flights were coming straight from Wuhan to San Francisco still. And I said to myself, America's gonna die. This is not good. This is just a nightmare of epic proportions, and America's not ready. Having worked overseas in multiple places, I knew this was not we weren't gonna shut America down fast enough. So knowing that, I asked her, well, what do you want to do? So we had to cut our lease in Beijing, and I had to move with movers who were officially allowed in the building only for a few hours, pack up 10 years of my things, and move out to storage, and decide what I was going to do for the next 7 months, because I knew that this is not going to get over fast if it's in China, and then it might also happen in the US. So I moved to LA for 2 weeks. And I had to cut my lease there because by March 15th, we knew that this was coming to the States and things were getting bad. And so I flew back home through Atlanta. And one of the things that I've learned in the 10 years of working in China is pivot. How fast can you pivot? When you hit a wall and there's a problem, you got to pivot. So I set up my voiceover studio. And I've worked in the voiceover studio in China for a lot of the time. Most of the time was in the studio or on set. So I spent 9 months on set and then the rest of the time in the studio. And I learned editing. I learned voice. I learned characterization. I learned everything I could get my hands on. I worked on so many projects and cut my teeth in Asia. So that when I got to the States, I had to learn American technology. I didn't know how to use Zoom. I didn't even know what Tinder was. I didn't know any of these apps. I was 10 years too late. And I'm only 33. So I was like, I don't know. Like I've missed 10 years of my 20s.
A 33-year-old old lady. There you go.
Yes, I was an old lady. It's true. So that's what happened. And I had to pivot very quickly and figure out how to start a business in a year during a pandemic as soon as I landed. Using what I learned.
In effectively a foreign country.
Yeah. And it's a foreign country. I hit reverse culture shock when I got here. I had gotten used to eating Chinese food and speaking Chinese at least, most of my day. And here I was learning how to speak English again and talk to people I wasn't comfortable associating with. I didn't even know how to talk to Americans. I didn't know.
It's taken me 10 years, but
has it really?
I'm getting there now. Yes. Oh. Here's a tip. Short words, fewer syllables, and a bit louder, and it works.
A little bit louder. I gotcha.
Yeah. I'll edit that bit out. They'll never hear about that.
They'll never know.
They'll never hear about that. So where is home now? Where are you based?
I'm currently in South Carolina, in the state, near the mountains.
Okay, so not anywhere where COVID is light. You've gone where you feel more at home with the start of the pandemic. So that's good to hear.
My family is all here, so that was really fun.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That 10 years that you spent in China, did you start out anticipating that you would be there for an extended period of time, or is it really the opportunities came and it's where you felt you belonged?
That is a great question. I think that most people go to China assuming it's going to be a couple months, and they end up staying for 10 years or more. That's what I've heard from the expat community. I'll just go for a few months. I'll just explore, you know. They get there and they're like, oh, it's kind of fun.
And how was it? How did it sit against your expectations? Having studied linguistics and Chinese, and you know, had exposure to the culture remotely, how did it feel when you were actually in the country?
That's also a really good question. I feel like when I got there, that was my people. I was comfortable. I was home. I landed in this. Oh gosh, I'm gonna cry a little bit. Now the waterworks are coming. It's like being home for me, and I have so many friends there. I have 10 years worth of contacts in the industry. I have spent my youth there. Post university, that was my life. I didn't experience work in America for the first time. I only ever worked in China, or New Zealand or Morocco, but with Chinese crews. So my family came with me no matter where I was. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And that's what theater is so attractive, other than that moment right before you get on stage and then the whole audience is there. You know, that's a really cool thing. But the fact that your family is constantly around you, and they're always the same. No matter where I go in the world, Chinese people think the same way, they talk the same way, they might have different dialects and maybe different languages, because there's several languages there. So we're 52 different languages, like.
And how fluent are you in the different dialects and the different languages?
Mandarin is my language, so I speak Mandarin fluently, but I have like a northern accent, so they laugh a lot. And most of my friends in the industry are northern based, so they all have the same accent.
Well, I'm from the north of England, and I have a northern accent, and people laugh at me. So what are you going to do? It's obviously a northern thing.
It's a northern thing.
It's a northern thing, obviously. But Robin,
yeah,
do you want to ask some questions?
Sure, from North America. So Tina, I'm not going to ask you to open up your checkbook, but in an economic question, did you find that you were struggling economically when you had to go on your own to do all the things on your own? Was it, oh crap, I'm not going to be able to pay this or pay that or whatever like that? Was it kind of like a layoff, or did you find that what you were doing was actually more fulfilling in that vein and in other veins? And talk a little bit about that, please.
Okay. So being on set in China, you don't always know when the next film is going to shoot. So you're already on a cycle of intense poverty, intense riches. So it's nice and I think that's it's an unstable thing. I'm not married, I don't have children. So this is something that I've really dedicated most of my life, and especially young adult life, to getting used to. I know that the projects will always come though, because every single time I've needed something, it's just popped up my way. But this year, I would say this is the least amount of money I've made in my adult life. And I worked really hard to make sure that I got students for accent reduction online. I switched all my classes to Zoom by March. So when I found I had no apartment, I called everybody and I said, all right, let's do Zoom. Let's get it done. And I worked, I think I have spent 9 hours today on Zoom. And I have 3 more after this. Students as well.
Well, thank you for agreeing to come on to our show. And
I'm honored, guys.
And I will say that if we do tend to go long on this show, but if you do need to step away and deal with things, we will understand. I'm impressed. I'm impressed with you anyway. Just in general, as I as I am with many of our guests who've got performance skills, or particularly those who are able to adapt. And again, we'll come to Marianne later. I recall from our conversation way back with Marianne, that was the feature of her career. That was, you know, it was something different all the time to get you to where you're doing. And it sounds like you've got that mindset that that expects that to be the case.
Yes, sir.
And that's admirable that you go to an environment that's totally different to anything you've envisaged and worked in before. You make a success of that, and then find yourself stuck in America.
Yeah.
And having to make that work as well. And I know Robin can echo this. I know Marianne as well. We spoke about this earlier. Stephen, we'll talk about this later. I'm sure you have experienced this, that when everything shut down, you have the, what are we going to do now? And making the success of Zoom and finding opportunities that may otherwise not have been available to you is it again has been a feature of things we've heard from our guests. So don't go anywhere, because we haven't really explored anything about your dialect coaching side of things, which I am particularly interested in, because my wife calls me the man of 1,000 voices. Everyone the same. Yeah, I'm not an accent man. I'm not a dialect man at all. So I'm fascinated by anybody who is. Robin's tried his best, and he hasn't been able to cure me of it. But there we go. So Robin, let's move on. So
Sure.
Tina, don't go anywhere. Just shuffle down the virtual coach. And Robin, would you like to introduce our next guest?
Yes, of course. So Stephen Cole, thank you very much for joining us. Playwright and lyricist, or playwright and composer?
Never composer.
Never composer, right.
With composers.
Right. So playwright and lyricist. And it got him through the thread of all of these wonderful people on the social media. And so Stephen, tell us a bit about your resume and how COVID has affected you when it first started, over the summer, at this point, and see what if anything's going to be happening in the future for that.
Sure. Well, I've spent like 25 years writing musicals. I've had 14 produced. Marianne, you know one of my collaborators, Jeff Saver. In fact, you screamed on one of my demos. You're a good screamer, you know. And yes. And Jeff Saver is one of my collaborators. David Crane is one of my collaborators. David Evans is one of my collaborators. Todd Ellison is one of my collaborators. And there are others. I've been one of those people. John Kander calls me a whore because I have a lot of collaborators. I don't just stick with one. But that's how come I believe I've had so many musicals written and produced, because I've worked with a lot of wonderful, wonderful people. It's all collaboration. And part of that has also been that I've written books. I've been a ghostwriter. I wrote Marnie Nixon's memoirs with her. I Could Have Sung All Night. You know Marnie Nixon, the famous ghost singer who sang for Audrey Hepburn and in My Fair Lady and Natalie Wood in West Side Story. And we wrote the book together. She always said, I'm the author, but you're the writer. And so it was all her story, but all the words were mine. And because she never got credit in the movies, like The King and I also, she made sure I got credit. And that's a wonderful thing. I've written my own books also, TV book about That Girl. Remember that TV show with Marlo Thomas? And so theater has been foremost as a sideline to make a little money, and money is important because, you know, theater doesn't do it all the time. I've worked for Rhodes Scholar, which is a worldwide tour organization for seniors, and I do their behind the velvet curtain tours in New York. And we have people showing up for a week, a theater orgy, I call it. We see 3 shows. We have Broadway stars show up and talk to them. I get to tell them about my career. We eat at Sardi's. They have a wonderful immersive theater experience. So when the last of those happened on the last week of February, and then suddenly, boom, this all happened. And there have not been any theaters, obviously, to come see, and they're not allowing these people to travel. And rightly so. So this has been all put on hold. So the money part of the career went away. 2 shows were ready to be produced, one in Texas and the other in California. And of course, they kept getting postponed because nobody knew when this was going to happen or not. And we were supposed to have a workshop for the musical I wrote with David Crane called Going Hollywood, which started out, the workshop would be in May, it would be in June, it would be in August. Finally, it was set for December, canceled, because Texas in December was not going to happen. And I was terrified anyway about getting on a plane, just horrified. So basically, since March, I've been here in Jersey City, across the river from Broadway, and not going over the river, except to ride my bike once or twice. But mostly, what do? So I write short stories, and I wrote a novel this year. So I did do that. It's been my saving grace to be able to get up in the morning and go to write something. Actually, having finished the first draft of the novel was like taking your child and killing it because every day I had the child growing, and then I didn't, and I'd wake up without that child. And so now I'm back to another short story, and the short story I'm writing right now is actually called Zoom. I had left it alone, and it's about a woman from 1920 who meets a magician in 1920. She's in the theater, her mother's a producer, and he puts her on the screen, and it turns out she's in Zoom in 2020. And she meets all these theatrical people in little boxes in which none of them can escape.
Well, there you
How
go.
the story will end, I don't know, but her mother's going to show up. But as the years go by in 1920, from 1920 to 1929, time in this year goes slower. You notice it does? And so every month is a year. And so her mother goes through from 1920 to 1929 to the crash. And once the crash happens, by that point, technology is better, and she winds up in Zoom also. I won't tell you. So that's the story I'm working on. It's a catharsis. I've written short stories this year that are very much about our situation in that way. One called 5 Little Screws, about a person who has nothing else to do but open up and repair old cassettes, and winds up disappearing into a cassette. Yep, that's me. It's a wonderful
we're getting an idea of your mindset. Yeah.
So yes, you know that I'm looking for an escape into old music. Yeah. And I've written a few songs here and there, but I have to say that it's been discouraging, and it's not something I feel like I want to do right now, write another musical when I have 2 or 3 sitting on deck, because I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring in the theater and how fast things will happen. And, you know, there's going to be a backlog, including my shows that are going to get on, or so. I thought, well, good, you can not collaborate for this year, and that's basically what I've been doing. And the, you know, you asked about the financial situation, and I'm happy to say that it's been terrible. It's just not, it's not an easy thing. We're going to have to move, you know, apartment's too expensive, moved here when things were going really well, going to have to find something less expensive. Luckily, things are getting less expensive in the area because they have to at some point. I feel we're living in the new depression. So that's what's really been going on with me. I keep hoping for the best and expecting the worst, as Mel Brooks sang. So that's my life at the moment.
So your regular process, of collaboration, is that one where you would typically find yourself in the city, sitting with other people, collaborating in person, or is it more of a solitary situation for you in a regular year?
Yeah, and regularly when you're writing a show, I mean, every collaborator is different. You know, sometimes you're writing 2 music, sometimes they're writing 2 lyrics. 90% of the time I write lyrics first. But we do need to be in the same room. We do need to be performing it together. You know, we were going to do this workshop in Texas, which sounded wonderful, which would be totally socially distanced with masks, but that to me sounded horrifying at the same time, to not be able to go up to an actor and whisper to them, to say something to the director, to be 6 feet away from people, including my collaborator, because we're all very, very careful. I will say I was positive for COVID early on and isolated I was lucky enough to be asymptomatic, but it was a little scary period. They're thinking, what will happen, especially early on when it seemed worse here in this area. So I'm very, very cautious, in fact, overly cautious, but that in collaborating in real life, I want to be standing next to my collaborator and singing the songs and reading the dialogue. And then you get actors in the room, and then you need to do all those things. And it needs people in a room. It needs closeness. This is not the same thing. You know that, you know.
Absolutely.
It's just not. And I find it, I've thought about it. In fact, the Zoom idea was originally to be a musical series, and we wrote some songs for it. And I just lost my taste for the idea of technology being the only way to do it. How, you know, the composer that I was going to do it with said, well, how am I going to play the piano? And it has to be pre-recorded.
Yeah. You
can't sync. If you were playing the piano now, you'd probably be a little behind, and I'd be singing, and it would sound like crap. So, and I am a perfectionist, as is every creator. So that's the difficulty of it. We want to be live again, for sure.
Yes.
We need to be in the theater. I hope that my novel gets published soon and becomes a movie, and then I can rest.
Yeah, then you can sit back and do exactly what you've dreamed of doing.
But
I mean, it's fascinating.
But I do miss being in the room with my collaborators. Even on the phone is just not enough. In fact, I find I've never been a phone person, and I always want to be there. Well, when can we get together? When can we actually look at each other? Because that's when the work gets done. That's when the real work gets done.
Well, that's certainly for me. That's the joy of theatre, is that collaboration to achieve an end goal that seems sometimes out of reach, or seems out of reach until 2 days before the show, and suddenly it all comes together. That working with other people to achieve that is what is. And Robin and I have worked together on a number of things, and it's great. It's just, it's what theatre is all about, and what performance is all about to me.
And for a brand new show, there's just no substitute from seeing the actors perform, seeing the musical numbers done. There's no other way. In fact, I go to all regionals when I can, when they'll have me. Just last fall, I had two new musicals on. I had my show Merman's Apprentice in San Francisco, and then I flew from there to Cincinnati for Casper. And walking in the room in the rehearsal of Casper, where they had already done an awful lot of work, they were ready, but it was, I could pinpoint what I could cut, what I could fix. That was the only way. If they had sent me a Zoom thing, I'd go, oh, you're boring me.
Yeah.
But live, so important to me.
Yeah, we're all looking forward to getting back live in some way, shape, or form. And I know this the Sherman Playhouse is dark, and clearly will remain dark for a period of time. And we're in our sort of planning phases now. We have a new artistic director, and I've tasked him with coming up with a season when we can't plan a season.
Right.
Yeah, when we can't do what we always do, what are we going to do, and how can we make live theatre, and how can we interact, and again, how can we collaborate? And it's tricky. It's tricky. Robin,
Yeah.
you've obviously got experience of this as well, because you are a very active director and theatre educator, and suddenly you've ended up at home all the time, which is great. Which is great for your wife. She loves it.
Yeah, I know she loves it. Yeah, but as I've said, I actually am profiting. I am able to do my audition technique lessons all over the United States and sometimes in other countries because of this technology. I hate admitting it, I really do, but you know, as Tina was saying, you got to do what you got to do. And I love that. I love this little thing called Venmo. Have you heard of this? This works well.
Yes, you're a Venmo fan. Yeah,
I'm a Venmo
I just
fan.
figured that out. I was so confused. Where does Venmo come from? What is Venmo?
It's like that old thing. Who's FICA and why is he taking my money? So it's been, and I have a new thing coming up called the Bard Room, which we're doing homeschooling for, you know, basically the tween age for Shakespeare. And so we're going to be reading 3 plays right starting on January 13th. And I hope that explodes because I think it's going to be amazing. Because I've been doing that one-on-one, but with a panel like this, it's going to be, you know, classroom type of atmosphere. And no, I'm not getting the vibes. I'm not getting the human interaction, which I do miss. But again, you know,
but you're getting the Venmos, so
I'm getting the Venmos. And then you just can keep plugging away as much as you can, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, but the funny thing is that I'm looking forward to, oh, I have this, and then something will open up, and I get to direct again with human beings and you know, bipeds walking around, you know, stuff like that. And so you can just add stuff. And I was writing too, like Stephen was doing, and wrote some stuff that I really like. Never would have done it because Marianne can attest to this, Steve can attest to this. You just keep going, project after project after project after project, and you don't stop. You think about next year, you think about all of that, and this is a way to do it. Do I want this ever again? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But I made the best of it, which is great. But enough about me. Let's move our virtual couch down. We're not moving the couch, we're moving the people. But thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. Stay where you are. And Marianne, thank you very much for coming back. Marianne has worked with a dance performing arts company in the town I live in New Milford, Connecticut. Called Fine Line. She also has been doing things for colleges and things like that. So over the summer, I think we talked, and or maybe it was late spring, where you were just starting choreographing on Zoom, teaching dance lessons on Zoom, and how it's it was just obviously the science fiction type of thing going on, and you're like, you don't know where it's going. So I'd love to know how that's going now, and how you guys are coping with it and seeing what's going on in the future.
Okay. Well, one thing I want to say, I want to thank the two of you so very much for this series and how you've been so supportive with the Sherman Playhouse. And my favorite building in Sherman is the Sherman Playhouse. It's just the most beautiful building, and it has so much joy. And a lot of you know, but I'm married to the first selectman, which is in any other state, the mayor of Sherman, Connecticut. Yes.
That's right.
And so I cannot thank you two enough for your passion and your dedication to our community. I mean, it makes me want to cry because I just think the last 6 months has been amazing.
Thank you for that.
And our job is done. So.
It means so much to the entire community. So thank you. And I want to say hi, Stephen. It's so good to see you. I just want to say one thing real quick, Tina. But I forgot this when I saw you. Charlotte D'Amboise and I are two. I'm a dancer. I've done several 12 Broadway shows, and I have danced my whole life. And then I became a teacher, and and I negotiated for 2 years to go to China to a university with Charlotte D'Amboise because we both adopted daughters from China. So I've been to China. I actually opened Chicago in China. And so when I went to China, I thought, these are my people. I love China. My daughter now is 17. And so we negotiated, Charlotte D'Amboise and I, she's a star of Chicago. And I've done the original 1996, I have to remember, revival of Chicago, and also the movie. So we were going to go to Shanghai and put that up. And it took us 2 months 2 years to negotiate. And we finally got our contracts. And the professor there contacted us after we sent all our information and said, there's something going on here. We might have to just put you on hold. Mm. And we were like, what? We've negotiated for 2 years. We have actually met him. We flew to New York. And so I'm hoping that when this lifts, I get to go back to Shanghai and put up Chicago with Charlotte D'Amboise. She's going to direct and I'm going to choreograph. So when you're talking about China, I know I love China.
That is so cool.
So I just had to say that. Yes, I'm going to be real quick because I'm a big talker. I've had this huge Broadway career, and then I went into teaching. And in the spring, when last time I talked to you, I was teaching at Western Connecticut University. And then I did start trying to choreograph and create on Zoom, and I made dance films on Zoom. And then this fall, I taught as a master teacher on Zoom for NYU. But one of the big things I have to say, and I don't want this to be about politics, but I did with my, I was one of the assistant associate choreographers for the television, Fosse Verdon. And who I worked with many times is Susan Meisner. And she's a huge television star and also director and also choreographer. She just did Halston, which I did pre-production with her, which is a new Netflix show. And we work a lot together, and we sat down and we like, how do we get the dance community involved in the election? And we put together a Zoom classes that went every Sunday. And we brought in the biggest dance stars and that we could beg to teach for us. And they, from Jerry Mitchell to Desmond Richardson to the big Tice from So You Think You Can Dance. And we went to Gaga in Israel. We brought in the biggest dance choreographers and directors that we could find and volunteered their time. And we put together Zoom workshops for 4 weekends. And then and it was called Flip It, to flip the Senate blue. And we, along with Dancing with Democracy, raised over $32,000. And we brought in over 2,000 dancers. And it was an amazing thing because the dance community from California to New York to even, and I have to say, the Europeans in South America and China and Japan, we had people from all over the world. They could not donate, of course, any money, but they were all donation only classes. And it was a huge success. And it was so nice to see the dance community come together. And that to me was a wonderful experience, because like what you said, Robin, it's amazing that you can actually sit on this little box and teach someone in Amsterdam and teach someone in, France. And, and the classes were, some of them, the classes were over 100, we had on a weekend, we had over 500 dancers and, a weekend. And it was amazing to have people from all over the world. And I'm going to say, everyone misses being in the studios together and being in the room together. And that's what I want to say with that comment with Stephen. It is so difficult for all of us that live in this world of a community, and that we pull the community together and we are a family, not to have each other. And
we've definitely seen that again through this show. The strength of the community, the performing arts community, whether it's creatives like yourselves, or whether it's technical side, or even organizational side of things. There's always a willingness to try to support the rest of the community, to be concerned about the rest of the community. And what was interesting about your election activity was what you were able to achieve as far as getting the numbers involved, getting the names involved, and getting it all organized, and it actually came off and was a success for you. So that in itself is a significant achievement. But do you think that and I'll see if I can phrase this correctly. Do you think that the timing of the election, the timing of the fact there's a runoff election in Georgia, along with the pandemic and the sudden availability of people, and also the desire to consume, from people who want to participate and join in to learn dance, they want to consume it. Do you think this would have been possible on the same scale at any other time?
No, I do not believe so. I believe that what was amazing is kind of what all of us are discussing. We were all put on pause. Everybody became an equalizer. I don't care if you're Jerry Mitchell, one of the biggest choreographer, director, producers, he was put on pause, just like, me as a chorus girl was put on pause. I mean, we're all put on pause. And I think that it took a moment for all of us we all went to shock. And then like what you were saying, that's why I enjoy so much this program. Then we all started creating. And I think too, I'm going to just talk about Zoom. Of course, it's not the same, like you said, Robin, about having everyone in person. But as a dancer, it also gives you freedom in your own personal space to just be kind of by yourself and not to be judged, and kind of like jump into classes maybe you would not ever take. And I'm hoping that when we leave this world, I don't think Zoom will ever leave us. I think this is going to be part of our creative fabric, but I'm hoping that that we keep this, like teenagers doing Shakespeare. They feel brave maybe because they're doing Shakespeare in their bedrooms by themselves, and that they're not sitting right next to someone. And I hope that we stay as brave as we are right now, when we go back into the rooms and we allow ourselves to be a little messy and to fail a little bit. That's what I hope. And the one thing that I thought was amazing is after every class, we did a talk back. And I think it was great for all these professional dancers that are all out of work to hear these professional choreographers and directors and writers and composers feel the same way they feel. Because this pandemic equalized us all.
Yeah.
There was not an upper class or a lower class anymore in the arts. We're all in the same boat together.
Yep.
And I thought that was a beautiful thing in a way.
That's very interesting, and that I haven't been able to sort of verbalize that or articulate that, but no, you've hit, and this show overall has really helped me understand what's going on in my head and what I see happening, and I think you're right that there seems to be a little bit more humanization of, for want of a better term, celebrities, or people who you consider to be at a particular level in the profession or in the field. There's certain. It's not a case of bringing them down to everybody else's level, but it's accessibility, and that may be because they really want to be involved with other people. Stephen.
Yeah, I think artists to start with are more empathetic and more involved anyway. I agree with you that it was a leveler, but we're artists, and it's not the same as the real world. If you sit on Facebook and you see the real world, which I do, I mean, I have to say, Facebook has been both a savior and a horror in this time, because it's what you have, but you also learn about people. And there was also a huge lack of empathy that still exists among people in America. Certainly, I'm sure it exists all over the world. The lack of empathy of people who don't have enough money at this point or don't have work, and why are you so lazy? And so artists, I do expect more of artists. Of course I do. And I do expect the biggest producers to give the biggest money, but it's the rest. You know, we're in a tiny little bubble, artists, and it's not everybody else. And people do not understand. And we know there's deniers of COVID, there's deniers of masks, there's all of this stuff going on. But I find it interesting. I've learned an awful lot about the human race this year. Now, this is my job because I dissect it and I put it into my work. And everybody can't be wonderful in a musical or a play. I wrote The Night of the Hunter, never forget that, as a musical. So, I mean, it's about a preacher who kills widows for their money in the Depression. And I think when we get out of this, that show will be more relevant than it ever was before. The wolf in sheep's clothing, someone who could fool everybody because they have power, and the power of religion, the power of politics. So what you're saying, Marianne, is absolutely wonderful. But I always have to remember artists. I have such a huge respect for every form of artists and people who care and empathize, because you can't do what we do without empathy. How can you be an actor, a dancer, a writer, any kind of art means you are understanding other people. And if we can teach anything, that would be the thing to teach. You know,
and there's a large.
I don't know how I get into huge fights over this. What was
there's
saying,
a
Robert?
there's a large swath of artists that we're not even talking about that are solitary, sculptors, sculptors. You know, people like that. We were talking to somebody from the Trans-Siberian Orchestra a couple months ago, and I mean, he doesn't have to go anywhere. He's in his recording studio and he's recording stuff and he's getting it out there and just throwing that in, push that button, here you go, and he's writing his own music and he is collaborating. But you know, he lives in New York, but he feels comfortable what he's doing. You know, his group has disbanded, so he's doing a lot of personal stuff. And then again, he was talking, I don't know if Steve, you remember this, but he was talking about a performance or production that he's working on that will happen. It will happen when this thing goes away, and he's working on it, you know. But yeah, and Marianne, that I really appreciate all the work you put into that, what you were talking about with the political thing going on. And it's great you got all those dancers. They would never, dancers and famous people. They would never have met the kids would never have met them.
No. And I have to say, with the TikTok musical that you were just talking about earlier, they have raised over $1 million so far for the Actors Fund. And who also has been amazing, and I have been on his program several times, is Seth Rosensky and his husband, James. And they have already, doing a very similar thing, raised over $600,000 for the Actors Fund. And I think that is what is amazing, because we have so many actors and dancers and musicians. I mean, so many artists and writers that are really struggling. And this is such an important time. And there again, like you said, us artists coming together, Stephen, there's no one like us. And so we will support each other. And to me, that's been so beautiful to see right now. You're so right. We are unique. We're unique.
I want to comment on what you said there, because I wanted to bring this up at some point tonight. What Marianne said really made my heart warm. And it's an odd thing to make my heart warm by her saying it's always been hard, you know, walking through Hell's Kitchen when you're in the 70s and making sure you're not killed and stuff like that, and trying to live off of what you're being paid and all of that, and that created such guts in these performing artists all over the place. I mean, we knew it was going to be hard. We knew we were going to have it hard, and this is one more thing.
Yeah, and so I never will ever in my life forget the AIDS epidemic, ever.
All right, yeah.
I lived through it as well.
Yeah, I lost all of my friends, you know, and how we were just, Don and I were talking about it, like how long we did not know anything about that. They did not put $10 billion to try to find a cure for that. Right. They just threw us all out to just, you know, I lost so many friends because our government did not care.
No.
And it was our community that was dying, you know. So once again, it's us, like you said, man. If you're going to survive in this world as an artist, you have to keep your heart open, and you got to have thick skin.
Yep. That's what you said.
Absolutely. And this kind of sort of brings us all the way back around to Tina and her experiences in China, you know, taking those opportunities as they come and being able to switch, switch what you do for a living, and then finding that those are the skills you've had to rely on sort of back in the US simply to survive. So it always surprises me on these shows, just what commonality we find. So just coming back to Tina and your the work that you're doing. You said you've got 3 more students sort of today. Again, are you finding that, you know, you've got students on the West Coast and students? So I mean, are you going to be up late dealing with someone for whom it's the middle of the evening this evening and things like that?
And this is incredible, because I think that exactly what Marianne is talking about. It's having that community around you and knowing who the people are that you want in your tribe and who you want to have your back. And initially put out the notice on Facebook and I said, I look like I'm indefinitely here for the first time in 10 years. Who's available? Who's out there? Who would like to meet? Who could sit down to a Zoom with me for 30 minutes? And I just did back to back to back 30 minutes every single day of the week at the beginning in March. And I connected with people in Singapore and Malaysia and Beijing, and I had already had that side of the world already. So now I was connecting with Canada and Alaska. I have a student in Alaska right now.
Alaska, whoa.
It's like, what is your time difference to I don't know. It's about 4 hours, I think. I've got, tonight is some people in Utah, and I have students in a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old who are Chinese adoptees as well. And that's very much my heart, Marianne. I would love to talk to you about that because she's everything. She's a ballet dancer. Oh, that makes me even happier because I am a dancer too. Not as great as you guys, but definitely I love dance. And yeah, it's, I think adoption is something that's so special, and that's also something that the adoption community is also very small. And so I have these pockets of beautiful.
Please contact me. Please contact me.
Yes. I would love to touch base with you guys. So I teach. What I ended up doing is I also taught adoptees how to speak Chinese again, and how to rediscover their culture and heritage. And so part of my job has been to bring China back home with me and then share it with the kids. Also.
That's a very special skill set to then find there's a role for it, and I applaud you for finding that role. And I don't know how many people are like you, as far as having that foot in both camps and being able to translate, no pun intended, but translate that experience into something that really helps the likes of Marianne and her family with that type of, and again, it's strictly speaking, it's not the performing arts, but it's clearly something that benefits from the fact that you are a performing artist. Yeah, it's wonderful. This is partly, I think, why we put this together, wasn't it, Robin? In the first place.
That's a great example of a culture crossover.
Yes.
That's the human condition in any language. Is what we're teaching.
Absolutely.
I love what Stephen said about artists, because the older I get, the more I realize that our tribe, like Tina just said, I don't care what country you're in, but all of a sudden you look and you're like, hey, you're a writer, or you're a dancer, or you're an artist, because we look the same, us artists. It doesn't matter what country we're in. We dress the same. We look the same. A dancer dresses exactly the same in Russia as they do in South America, as they do in China, as they do in Africa, and they still do the plie exactly the same. So it's amazing. Shakespeare is spoken the same all over the world. I mean, that's the cool. We sing the exact same. It's kind of cool.
And I wrote my novel in my underwear. I'm sure others did too.
That is a picture I'm not going to be able to get out of my head now.
Oh, I'm wearing it right now.
if I see your novel on the shelves,
yes,
that'll be the image I hope the flyleaf.
It has show business in it, but it's also about a murder.
Well, I hope on the flyleaf, when they've got the author's picture
of me in my underwear.
In your underpants. So there you go.
Absolutely. It works for Truman Capote. It'll work for me.
And we'll probably read it in our underwear. So
yes, exactly.
There you go. Maybe
that's my new title from the new book.
Yes, there we go. We're descending into underwear territory, which I think is absolutely hilarious. But I think we maybe I'll just go back to politics. No, but I think we've naturally come to a nice break. I really would love to talk all night about things, but I think we've come to the end of our time. This has been a great evening. I think just about every show we do, we Robin and I have a blast on. This has been a great one to bow out on. The enthusiasm and you know, that sense of fellowship that we're getting from you guys is wonderful. I'm so pleased that, Tina, we've been able to talk to you about something which I know is a mystery to so many of our viewers. You know what, and I really would like to explore more about theatre and performance in China, and your career out there. That fascinates me, as well as the dialect and voice training, which, as I say, is also close to everybody who's ever acted with me, close to their hearts. And Stephen, you know, you're prolific in terms of what your body of work so far, and you are another example of, you know, creators have to create. You're a lyricist. You live in music. You live in musical theatre. That's your bread and butter. But when that's taken away, you're finding that other avenue and taking that opportunity, which, again, recurring theme. You know, when things are taken away, there are other opportunities, whether it's just the opportunity of time, or whether it's, you know, spotting a niche that you didn't spot before. Then that's wonderful. And Marianne, it's absolutely, as always, delightful to talk to you, and your enthusiasm is infectious. It really is. One thing I really would like to say is I'd like to say a big thank you to Robin Frome as well. Robin came to me over 6 months ago with this idea of a support group for people in the performing arts who were being affected by the shutdown. Because we were hearing horror stories, we were hearing people weren't happy. None of us who had been involved in theatre were happy about the fact that we couldn't do anything and we didn't know what was going on. And Robin saw the need for a way to bring people together to discuss these things. And as we've mentioned before, we anticipated that it may well be a time for venting, and a time for sobbing, and a time for you know, the darker side of things. Yeah, you know, and we anticipated that, and that was what we were prepared for. I think what we were less prepared for is what we've seen this evening, and what we've seen consistently. And you know, it's a testament to Robin, really, that he came up with that idea, and gave me the opportunity to be involved as well.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Steve. I'm so glad that you know, as I left the Playhouse, Steve came in. It's a nice blending of talents here that we could co-host this together. And I think if he doesn't hate me, we'll work together again. Oh, yeah. Maybe in a week, maybe
tomorrow.
Yeah. We'll take a couple months. No,
I think so. Yeah, I've seen enough of you. So.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
And he's been fantastic at putting this whole thing together. He's an IT guy, thank God, and I'm not. And he has been fantastic at putting these things together, getting them out there, and the word out there, and all that stuff. Yeah, I'm excited. I also wanted to say, I know we have to wrap things up, but I also want to say that I'm trying to get some newspapers interested in this whole series from start to finish. I think it'll be a great story, starting with our own little newspaper called the Waterbury Republican, and maybe hopefully branching out of that into, I don't know, the New York Times. I'm just kidding. Any of those things going on out there. You know, I've seen articles kind of like this before, and I hope that it can get out there, because it really, what I really felt a lot about this series was the charitable, the things that Marianne has said over and over again about the community, the large community, the great leveling, the leveling play within the large community. We have people that you know, probably could have done something else with their time on a 7:30 on a Monday night, but they chose to be with us, and that's great. Tom Cruise hasn't gotten back to me, but you know, I'm still hoping. It's a great equalizer. Anyway,
great equalizer.
He's got a Venmo account. Anyway, but thank you everybody for being on here. Thank you for everybody that's been on the show and the people that have repeated. And please stay tuned. We'll do some highlights and get back together with some people. And we really do. We really want to see what's going to happen, you know, in a few months and where things are going. So
that's right.
Big fat thank you to Steve. Thank you.
As we round up, as we round up this show and this season, one thing I must give a little shout out for the Showman Plays and the Showman Playhouse, from the point of view of, you know, we're a theatre like every other theatre. We're a small regional theatre. We're not for profit, and at the minute that means not for revenue either, because not a lot's going on. So an appeal in general to our viewers and anybody involved to support us. You can go to our website, shermanplayers.org, and we've got a support page on there where you can make a donation, and that obviously would really help us. I also want to appeal to you guys on our guests tonight and all our guests we've had before. We've built up quite a community. We've got ourselves quite a lot of contacts. We know a lot more people than we did 6 months ago, and it'd be great to be able to call on you for support, you know, at some point. So you may well find me knocking on your door, either
or my husband's door,
yes, and your husband. Well, your husband made an appearance earlier. We saw Don earlier. You know, you tell him to be a little bit quieter closing doors, but he's good. But you know, so we will knock on your doors and ask a favor or two, whether that's just to appear on something else. Yeah. Like this, or sure. What I'm quite keen on, and I've been discussing this with Matt, our artistic director, is, you know, maybe having some when we can have some sessions again in the Playhouse, having some sessions with, you know, people from the industries who can come and talk to audiences and have, you know, panels or an evening with, or even if it's virtual. We may well look at that. So you might well be getting an email or a message from myself saying, "Remember me? I'm the guy with the northern accent." So I'll throw that one out there so that people aren't too surprised when I do call Tom Cruise and say, "We know you wanted to be on the show." And you couldn't, so why don't you come to the Playhouse and talk to us a little? But thank you so much, Tina, Stephen, and Marianne. Wonderful night again. This show will be available on Facebook Live from now. I'll also tidy it up a little and repost it again. And as I think I mentioned earlier, I'm looking to put everything on YouTube, so that people can go back to our previous episodes. I may well go back and watch them all again, with a tear in my eye and a lump in my throat. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's good night for me. It's good night from our guests, and all that's left is one final time. Say good night, Robin.
Good night, Robin.
Hey, good night, everybody. Bye bye now. Bye bye now.